Testing. Testing. Hey, everybody ready? Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia City Council Chambers. This is a regularly scheduled committee of the whole meeting. We'll call this meeting to order. Today's date is Tuesday, November 19th, 2024. The time is 9:04 a.m. We have some presenters today, and we have one counselor that is absent. So we will turn our agenda over to our city administrator, Britt C. Bennis. Britt?
Thank you. As Steve Scharf from Baker Tilly has not made it yet, we'll jump down to item number 2, which is George Eilertson from Northland Securities to discuss the potential funding options for the purchase of a ladder truck.
Okay, thank you. And once again, good morning, Mr. Eilertson, and thank you for making for the long trip from southern Minnesota to come in. It's on such short notice to give us some information.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the council. Always enjoy being in front of this group. Yes, talking about financing of a fire truck this morning, or, I mean, it's the same discussion it would be for any capital equipment for the city. In your packets, there's I believe, a one-page overview of a financing plus tax impact on the bottom half of the page. And so this, based upon discussions with your staff, Mayor and Council, the approximate cost of the new fire truck is $2.459 million. And my understanding is that you would consider ordering that truck this year, but it's a 4-year build or up to a 4-year build. So there's no obligation for the city to make a payment on that until delivery, is my understanding. That would actually be advantageous, I believe, for the city because you've got other debt falling off during that 4-year period that would help make this less of an impact on the taxpayers. So just a little bit of an overview. There's 3 different options, if you will, to finance the fire truck. One is what's called general obligation equipment certificates. That's a very common way that municipalities use to finance the purchase of public works, public safety equipment, et cetera. A second would be a lease. You've got leases with manufacturers for various pieces of equipment as well. And the third is what you use to finance the public safety building, and that's a direct loan through the USDA. And that one kind of works in conjunction with what I talked about, the general obligation equipment certificate, because you need that general obligation pledge as security for the USDA. So those two work in conjunction. The nice thing about the USDA financing approach is that the interest rate is lower than what the current bond market is. And I realize we're not talking about issuing debt today, but historically, it's been more favorable than the market conditions. So when I refer to this sheet, Council, I'll actually be making a few asterisks and then potentially sending you an update following today's meeting. So this sheet, I show you a 15-year financing approach and a 20-year financing approach. Now, I talked to your city staff about what's the useful life of this truck. And feedback I received was that it's 20, perhaps even a little bit longer. That's good because we can certainly justify going out to a 20-year financing then. 20-year financing results in lower annual debt service payments, lower annual levy payments as well. So just focusing on that 20-year column for now, I show a 4.91% interest rate based upon the current market. What that results in is $214,000 levy. State of Minnesota says over levy by 5%, so that's what the shaded number of $224,000 is. And that's all the tax impact information below that is based upon that 224. Based upon USDA, their current rate is 3 7/8, so about a full percentage point less than what we're showing on the sheet. If we applied that to here and did that financing as opposed to more of an open market bond financing, It would lower that from 224,000 down to approximately $195,000. So we're going in the right direction here. And then the other thing, working with your staff, there's existing leases that you have for pieces of equipment. Public Works has 3 existing leases that mature in 26 or 27. And when we add those 3 together, it's about 95,000 of levy per year that you have to support those 3 leases. And so the update I could provide to you is putting that USDA rate on it. It lowers your bond payment from, again, roughly 224 to 195. And then if you do factor in your existing leases that are falling off, that's another 95,000. So that basically cuts the impact that you see on this page approximately in half. And so I wanted to address that with you this morning, Council. I can provide an update to this sheet that you can see in the coming days. So I can address any questions, Mayor, you or the City Council may have.
Yeah, thank you, George. We'll pause right there and see if any councilor has any questions or concerns or comments. First, Councilor Motley, then we'll go over to Councilor Johnson. Councilor Motley.
Thanks for coming in and giving us some information. I like hearing that bonds would be dropping off like 95,000. My only thought is I hear Public Works and it makes me wonder if there's something else that might be failing down there that would need to be possibly bonded for. And so in my mind, I feel like that's a wash because I think probably something else would be coming from Public Works. So you're saying the USDA, if we went the USDA option like we did with the Public Safety Center, that's where we're looking at roughly 195?
That's correct. It lowers it by almost 30,000 per year.
What percent is that roughly? And I know,
For an interest rate on the
Yeah.
USDA loan, it's, as you can see on this page, the 20-year 4.91%, it lowers it to 3.875%.
3.875, okay.
And again, I'll get you updated numbers based upon that. My recommendation would be, you do have time, since you don't have to make a bond payment, or pay on the truck rather, for 3 or 4 years, that you do go through the process of USDA and get, it's roughly the same process that you went through. There's a lengthy checklist that you did on your public safety building. They did note that it's a more streamlined process since there's not any environmental reviews or architectural type reviews for the fire truck, but yes, we can
Okay.
update that.
And then one other thing, let's just say hypothetically here, the council greenlights a 20-year bond or whatever, and we don't make a payment for umpteen years ahead. Can the city receive money from outside sources and put that towards a USDA loan? Or are we not allowed to do that once we've locked in with USDA for a bond?
Great question, Mayor and Council, just to address that question. USDA loans are, I'm a fan of them because they're very flexible. They're callable or prepayable on any date. So, for example, if you do go through the process, get obligated funds with them in the next year, let's just say, but you don't need the funds within 3-4 years from now, you could apply any grant to downsize that long-term loan with them. Or for example, if beyond year 4, if you access some other funds, you could use that to buy down or reduce the levy as well.
The USDA allows you to pay the loan off early, hypothetically. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Motley. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. And that was going to be my question too, knowing that we need to assume there'll be more needs with the Public Works and possibly Police Department or Parks and Rec so I would agree that 95,000 really shouldn't be a consideration as we move forward, knowing we're going to have other needs. So I appreciate you asking that, Councilor Motley, and I appreciate you coming up and talking to us. And just as a reminder, after we scheduled a public meeting, we still have a year to do something, otherwise we just hold another public meeting, correct? Okay, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page for that, so, and I do think there's an opportunity, as Councilor Motley said, to find some outside funding and donation from our community partners as we move forward, as our ladder truck serves hundreds of square miles, and we have contracts with other entities, both public and private. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. So any other? Okay, I have a question of clarity with respect to process moving forward. So if we, as a elected body, are prepared to move forward, and we have the public hearing with respect to that to determine, the bonds, et cetera, and I know that the USDA direct loan is a collaborative for the GEO equipment certificate that we issue, and so I understand that piece. But so while we're moving forward and potentially asking for some funding from the USDA loan and looking for other outside resources in order to help accomplish and pay down the debt over a period of time. So as we move forward, are we obligated, because it appears to me this is an investigative piece, are we obligated to order the fire truck before we start asking for funding? So the question is that if we get all our ducks in a row and we find that it's acceptable, it's workable, and it from a financial perspective, it's prudent 4 years down the road for us to make the first payment for that, even if we delayed the ordering it for another year, it would be a year beyond that, and so we would have to have another public hearing potentially. So that could all be done, but the question, I guess, is would we have to order the fire truck before we start this process of going through the funding options?
Mayor and Council, certainly good question on timing. My understanding on the truck itself is, the build doesn't start until you commit to it. And so it's 3 or 4 years out before you receive that. In terms of the financing aspect, I believe that you can start, if it were just the general obligation market that we'd be accessing and not USDA, for example, you can issue your debt, go through the steps that we're talking about prior to purchasing the truck. Ultimately, or oftentimes in the market, it's you get the bond proceeds and then you purchase the truck. You maybe put the order in at the front end and then make the financial commitment on the back end. And I believe that's what you're referring to here, is that you'd be looking, or the company rather is looking for you to commit to the truck, lock in a price in the current market. Mm-hmm. And then at the city level, what's nice is that you've got time to go through the steps, look for grant sources, and then go through the steps of perhaps USDA that might afford a lower interest rate for the city. So does that address your question, Mayor?
It does, and then an ancillary follow-up question to that would be, so if we were to purchase it, and of course, or place the order and don't have to make a payment for 4 years or whatever, once we get the funding sources, everything's in place. So when it comes time to make our first payment 4 years down the road, we're going to be able to do that. But one of the cogs in the wheel, for the lack of a better analogy, is that if we were to order the fire ladder truck and then don't find that we have necessary funding in order to accomplish it, or we determine that it's just not feasible to do, because whether it's debt, do we have more debt service or less, or whatever the case may be, we decide we can't pull the trigger on that this year or next year. But if we place the order, according to the assistant fire chief, once we order and if we cancel that order, there's a penalty that we would have to pay. And what that penalty is, I don't know. So that's kind of the crux, one of the crux of our obstacle moving forward with this funding source. So I thank you for the clarity about we don't have to purchase it until we get all our funding in place. Don't have to make our first payment until after. But it's the company that's building the piece that would require us to commit to the purchase of that. And if we were to cancel that order, there would be some type of a penalty mechanism in place which we have to pay. And so that would be a risk that we would take. So that was the question I have. So that still would be, there would still be, aside from what we do here with the funding. So thank you for that, Mr. Eilertson.
Well, Mayor and Council, I believe you're doing your due diligence now, which is good, because you're asking the questions before you commit to it. I believe at this point you haven't committed to the order yet, but part of this process may lead you to that. I think my understanding from reviewing with your staff is that you can lock in a price in today's market, and then even if you don't pay for 4 years, that you're not paying extra interest over time for the next 4 years on money. You can wait until 4 years from now to do your financing, and the fire truck price is locked in. So I think my understanding is that if you commit to ordering the truck, that you've moved that down the road. It's just then a matter of when do you commit to the financing. If you're basically saying, yes, we're committing to eventually financing this for this ladder truck, it's just a matter of when. And so, Mayor, I hope that,
It does, and it's just something I'm sorry, I apologize. This is something for the council to consider. You know, it's the risk you take. If we commit to purchase and we say, yes, build this thing for us, we'll figure it out, we'll get the financing 4 years down the road, we'll start making our first payment. That's the risk we take. If we can't do it and we decide to cancel, there's a penalty that we would have to pay to the company making that build. That would be the only talking point, I would say, with respect to that. But if we have the hearing and moving forward, I think we talk through that as well. So I think your presentation today has been very helpful to me and the councils with respect to that. So I'm going to move for some other questions. Mr. Edson, first we'll go to Councilor Beyondich, and then we'll go back to Councilor Motley. Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. And you asked, one of the questions I was going to ask is, do we know what that penalty is if we lock in and we don't have that number?
No, and I wouldn't lock in if we're not going to be serious about doing it.
Right.
It's not just the penalty, it's the public black eye, because there's not many of those vendors, and we probably wouldn't be able to order it again if we had pulled it from them.
And I would like to know from finance how you feel about this, or what direction you would guide us in.
Mayor,
Yes, Sherry?
thank you. Councilor Bandage. It's really up to the council. You've got 3 options here. The USDA, I'm with George on it. It's a lower interest rate, longer span, lower payments. I wouldn't go past the life of the equipment, because then you're upside down. But I also do think it's a good talking point to our surrounding cities. They're enjoying the little perks of our equipment and benefits. Their insurance rating is lower. They get the same rating as we do because we're there with mutual aid. So yeah, I think if you don't pursue this and then you decide to go back on it, it is a black eye.
So I think in answer to your question, Councilor Beyondich, I think it would be prudent for us, unfortunately, the assistant fire chief or the fire chief is not present today, but to answer that question about what would be the penalty based upon the proposal that they received from this trailer company, it'd be good for us to know that as we move forward with the informational hearing. We can still pull it back if we have to, but to know that would be important.
And I do appreciate having conversation further with neighboring communities. So for me, I think I appreciate all the information. I look to finance for advice or guidance on where to go, on how to do it. But I also feel that just having a little bit of time to work it out, I think there's no doubt in anybody's mind here that, is it needed? It is needed. But it's a matter of time and gathering all the funds that we can to help support this. Thank you.
And thank you, Councilor Beyondich. And it's not just this piece of equipment, it's the other purchases, items that may come down the pike in the next 1, 2, 3, or 4 years that we're going to need. So how does that, how does the purchase of this weigh into, so we have to have a plan moving forward. But I think we all agree that the ladder truck is a necessary purchase in order for us to effectively provide health and safety for our community. Counselor Motley.
Well, I had one question, but now I have two. First one being at Sherry, after hearing you just speak. If we had potentially greenlighted the purchase of the truck, is it in the city's best interest that the council direct the city staff to reach out to local communities to see if they'd be willing to help in any way of funding, or is that not even a topic to cross?
Sherry?
Counselor, Mayor, I think at any time reaching out to communities in a collaborative manner is the best way to get something done. And so it would take a good PR group to do that. And if you know other city members or council that in the various communities, and if you know them personally, yeah, I'd start the talk. I would. I'd start the talk and positive about it, because it is a positive thing. If we don't get a new ladder truck, like you said, there's a need. Our rating is going to go down, which lowers everybody else's rating. We're in this together.
I couldn't agree more. We provide a lot for the local area, much greater than our tax base. Thank you, Sherry. And to you, one last question. So hypothetically, we greenlight the purchase of the fire truck. We're set in at, just throwing out the percent, 4%. In 2-3 years, okay, now the city's got a commitment to sign on the dotted line and the interest rate has dropped to 2%. Can we get the lower USDA interest rate?
Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the question, and very good question. Through the USDA process, my understanding of working through it with other municipalities, as well as your public safety facility project, that there's 2 steps where you can lock in a rate. One, when you get initially obligated the funds, and then closer, and Britt, correct me if I'm wrong, and then there's this point right before you draw down the funds. If the rate's better, I believe you can get reapproved for that lower rate, so yes.
We're notified the rates are increasing, so we need to lock you in now with a pre-app, which we did, and because then the rates have increased. So I think that we could probably work with the USDA and the same thing, that rates are decreasing, maybe we should wait a quarter or whatever it may be, and we balance that game there.
Right, so there's, through the process, we would, if that's the direction staff goes on filling out an application with USDA, you're not obligated to a rate day one. You have to get through so many steps, and then you can lock in a rate. But then if rates do go lower, I believe there's the opportunity to kind of unlock and lock back in at that later date.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. So for me, it's about next steps. So you've made the presentation here. So the next step would be us to have a meeting, and a public meeting, and talk about what we're going to do. And likely you would probably come back and present to the public as well, or we would find a way in which to disseminate this information to the public that's palatable to everyone that understands. And then decide at that particular time if we want to purchase the ladder truck or not, or is the next steps to agree to purchase the fire truck down, move forward with the public hearing. Now, I understand that the fire chief had indicated that after January 1st, there may be a price increase. So there's a pressure on the city council to make a decision between now at the end of this year, and we're going to have 2 more council meetings this time around. So not that I want to spend the taxpayers' money more if there's an increase or not, whether or not that's the case. That's what's been indicated by our assistant fire chief. That would probably be the case. It may be a price increase. I don't know. Likely they say it would be. But the case is, as long as we do our due diligence over time, you want to minimize any cost to the taxpayer. But if we can't, get this process moving forward in a manner which we're supposed to do it. If it goes past January 1st, then, that's what we have to live with. But, so I guess my question is, would the next step be have the public meeting and then determine if we're going to order, or make a motion to order the fire truck? That's first, right? And so there's no really way we could schedule a public meeting before the end of the year, is there? There is. It is set, December 10th? No. When is it? Tuesday. What, 8 o'clock in the morning?
No, 10. 5, at 5 p.m. before the council.
Oh, I apologize.
public
Yeah,
hearing.
yep, I apologize. So we're setting the hearing for 5. Okay, very good. Okay, we're moving forward with that. And then move from there, we could actually make a determination if we want to move forward with the purchase. So thank you for that clarity. That is 72 years old. Sometimes I miss those things, and I did miss one big time. So thanks for the reminder. Counselor Piondik.
It is for sure that there is a rate increase on January 1. There is. And how much is that increase? We don't, okay.
They've guaranteed the price through December 31st.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Beyondich. So, Mr. Eilertson, thank you. It puts a lot of clarity for me, for sure, and I'm sure all of us as well. So when we have the meeting next Tuesday at 5 p.m., will Mr. Eilertson, will you be here for that as well? No, we'll just do that then, okay. So we'll be able to disseminate this information. So anything else to offer, Mr. Eilertson, or any other questions or comments from the council? First, Mr. Eilertson.
None for me, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Council? Thank you very much. Your guidance and expertise is always well appreciated, so thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you so much, George. Steve Scharf from Baker Tilly is here to discuss first the study for the stormwater rates and to discuss also the sanitary sewer rates.
Good morning, Mr. Scharf. Thank you very much for coming.
Morning, Mayor and council members. Apologies for the slight tardiness, but appreciate the flexibility on the agenda. As Britt had mentioned, I'm going to discuss the stormwater study and the sanitary sewer study we conducted for you all throughout this past year, and some of the proposed or recommended changes in rates that you have before you in the draft resolution. Just to start off, I'll cover the storm sewer first. We looked at this from an objective of financial prudence and covering expenses and future capital outlays that are being looked at on the horizon. We did just issue bonds funding storm sewer projects, so that was also a consideration for the proposed rate increases or changes. Just to work through, you should hopefully have in the packet the study that was conducted. This one's dated August 21st. And if it works for you all, what I'll do is just go over some of the highlights of that study, spare you some of the details. So working through, we look at some elements considering equivalent billing units. So that's comparing residential to multifamily to commercial and industrial. That's a methodology that's taken professionally for these sorts of rate structures. So page 2, that's what you're seeing here, is the equivalency factor calculation.
Can you tell us what page you're on, please, in the?
Page 2, yes. Yep.
That's not our page 2.
This is the stormwater study dated August 21st.
Our page 3.
There's, oh,
Thank you.
so I'll add a page to each number.
We're good, thank you.
So looking then at page 4, that's the additional bonds or the bonds that were issued earlier this year. That is a factor we look at in calculating the overall expenditure requirement for the system. And of course, that is a large element here, making sure that the bonds are being paid with revenues available. Page 5, this is really kind of one of the hearts of the study, and that's the equivalency unit for a scenario 1 that is proposing a $5 residential charge, and that is per month. And so then that equivalency unit that you saw probably on page 3 is the sort of multiplier for residential. So you take that sort of unit factor and multiply it by the $5. That's how you're kind of getting to the rest of the other facility types. So this is a scenario 1 or an option 1 provided in the resolution. I'll go over some of the pros and cons of each of those here in a little bit. But working down, we can see that the use value at the bottom is that $5 mark, which I think in the resolution, if I'm seeing this correctly, would provide for your option 2 that's provided in the resolution. So you can see that translation there as single-family residential at $5. Again, one of the big things that we're looking at on the top of that scenario being, what's the maximum annual debt service? So again, I'm on page 5 still. Maximum annual debt service and coverage requirements for the annual payments of those bonds. So we're factoring in that calculation and determining what that $5 will produce. Going to page 6, so this translates into your option 3 of the resolution draft. We looked at what a $10 per month residential and flat proposed across the board charge would look like and produce. We do this in an effort to not only cover the debt service payments, of course, but also provide some funding for future capital so that you're not fully relying on bonds moving forward. In this case, this does provide for net revenues available for replacements, improvements, or additional debt service of $184,000. So it is an option that does provide additional funding for future planned projects for the system. And then if we look at page 7, that's sort of the outline of what I just covered from a property type. So we can see here on scenario 1, which is the same as your option 2 and option 1 being on an annual basis of the resolution. So we can see that single family, multifamily, commercial, industrial, and public or semi-public all have varying equivalency factors to that $5 sort of base value. And that's where you get the proposed monthly rate scenarios that are provided on that scenario 1 of your page 7. Scenario 2, which again translates to option 3 of the resolution, is that flat $10 sort of across the board for each property type. Again, that's producing additional revenues available to fund other improvements to the system or additional debt in the future, depending on the need and project type. So that forms sort of the basis of our recommendation on the proposed rates that we have in the draft resolution. Of course, my understanding being you'll probably look at picking one of those, but again, some of the focus being the desire for possible future capital requirements, kind of leaning towards that $10 flat charge across each property type. So I'll stop there for any questions so far on the stormwater piece before we get into the sanitary sewer. Sanitary sewer has a little bit more detail to it.
One question, Mr. Scharf, does this apply both residential and commercial, that $10?
That's right.
All of it?
On option,
Just to
option
clarify
3.
the public's edification, all.
That's right, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Other questions so far? Councilor Motley.
I'm just kind of curious why you'd put a single-family residential at $10 and a commercial business at $10 with the same rate.
It was an idea that I actually came up with. I said, what if we just charge everybody the same flat fee? Just because it's easier for the utilities to bill. It was just a question. It wasn't the suggestions they came out with was that we need to go up at least to the option 2.
Okay. I said, okay.
Yeah, Mayor, council members,
Yes, please.
that is, each one of these options that are provided will cover expenditures and debt service. It does just provide different scenarios that would be available for consideration.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Motley.
Option 1 and 2 are, like I mentioned, they're the same. They're just broken out in how we do it, either monthly fee or annual, same dollar amount in the end. However, those options only get us to cover what we have right now or what we know right now. Whereas option 3 or some form of the option 3 would get us to cover debt we don't know yet. So if we ended up doing a major storm sewer to that line that Jim Rosvick keeps talking about, that one with the bricks in it that's 5 feet wide, if that one collapses, we'd have some funds to work on it.
And I totally understand that. I just find it interesting that you charge a commercial business
Yeah,
and a
and it
single.
was just an idea.
And I appreciate that. I'm just thinking out loud, so,
You
okay.
see, most other cities, in that little comparison, do a equivalency factor, like he mentioned, that residential pay less than commercial or industrial based on, usually they're always bigger and more land use, and more coverage, parking lots and those kind of things.
Okay,
Makes sense.
okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. But the rates for commercial and industrial is higher than the rates for residential.
They are right now, yeah. Right now, they're, yeah, we currently pay $6 a year for residential. We're talking to go to $5 a month. So it's going to be a big change.
So it'll be a change, but at the same time, that $10, no other counselors, okay. I believe it's prudent for us to plan ahead. I know some of the residential customers will be concerned about $10, but instead of raising it to $5 or $6 or $4, then we have debt service, we have things coming along the way a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and we don't have the money to pay, as you indicated to Mr. Scharf, then you have to bond for that. So now, why not plan ahead, have some money in the enterprise fund, which is dedicated only to that service? Doesn't go in the general fund, only to that service. It's just prudent for us to have some extra money moving forward. If we have some new projects moving on, or whatever the case may be, it helps alleviate that, and so we don't have to come back and ask them to, for another increase in the rates moving forward. So I think it's prudent to pick that option from my perspective. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the first Councilor Beyondich and then over to Councilor Johnson? Councilor Beyondich.
So Sherry, when you would set this up, if we did the higher amount, there's a separate, is it a sewer fund or a fund that the excess would go into for just projects relating to this?
Mayor?
Sherry?
Good question, Counselor. Yes, we did set up a separate storm sewer fund under the sewer fund. It's all under sewer. But we did that purposely because of the 2024A bond. It has a commitment. They broke it down exactly how much that bond payment is going to be charged towards the storm sewer. So we already created a fund for that.
At the current rates that we have right now, we are not.
Mayor, sorry.
Sherry?
Yeah, and I do like this little bit of a buffer, I'll call it, of 184, because when I did the math, I needed a bare minimum of 175,000. Right now, it only collects 25,000 a year. Got to come up with that within a year. The payment for this is due in a year.
When is the last time there has been an increase?
Since we created this fee, we created the fee in, I don't remember, 3 years ago, I believe. That was the first time we ever had a storm sewer fee, and we haven't increased it since. And at that time, we agreed to only bill it annually in June. So you would see it on your bill in June at the one time, and that was it. And we just started it just to get one going, because we had a feeling these road projects were going to start coming and they were going to require this. Because the reason we put it under the storm sewer fund is it reduces the amount of general levy we have to levy, and it reduces the amount we have to specially assess. So we broke it out into its arms storm sewer fund so that we could pay for it by rates and fees and not by levy money.
Thank you, Councilor Beyondich. Thank you, Britt. Councilor Johnson.
I think I'm well aware that this needs to be done. However, going from 6 months a year to $120 a year is huge. Would it be prudent to create a 3-year plan for escalating that would allow, especially families and businesses, to budget accordingly, know that it's going to increase over the next 3 years, and then in the middle of next year, we look at what happens the following year. So we have a continual sustainability plan. Maybe we don't have to increase it so much the 4th year. Maybe we're doing good and we have a substantial amount of savings for emergencies, and then we only need to increase it a quarter or 50 cents a year. Because I know we're going to be talking about other increases with the sewer, the regular sewer, and I just can see this being very hard to swallow for a lot of families.
100%. And this one is different than the sanitary sewer. The sanitary sewer is strictly driven by consumption. So it's based on your water usage. So if you use less water, you pay less sanitary sewer. This is a flat fee that you get charged for the rain falling on your yard, basically. So I do see what you're saying, Counselor Johnson. In that case, I would recommend the option 2. So it would be an increase to $5 a month rather than the $6 a year, but then it's smaller. And then we agreed next year when we bond for the next street projects, we look again, what do we need to increase, whether it's 50 cents a dollar, no change, whatever it may be, that we just keep.
And I think that would be, it's going to be hard no matter what. We have to raise rates because we're losing money on this. And instead of it being on the general levy and people with more expensive houses paying maybe an unfair portion of it with their taxes, having the flat fee for residential and then another fee for I like how it's broken out here. So I think it needs to be kind of a combination of what we have here, and then we look at revisiting it every year before companies are creating their budgets, and especially landlords who are looking at how do they maintain their slim profit margins while we still are maintaining us. And it does seem that in the last several years, our rain events have become more intense. It's been raining for well over 12 hours now, just today. So I think we have to find that balance. So that would be my request and suggestion, is to come up with a 3 to 5 year plan on budgeting, so that it's not a several 100% increase in 1 year. Thank you.
If I may, Counselor Johnson, add to that, I did put in the resolution, I proposed it when we talked to Mr. Scharf and Mr. Miller about the study, we had proposed that we'll plan to review it every 3 years. I'll change the resolution to at least annually for the next 3 years until we get to a point that we're comfortable with this.
I would appreciate that.
Yep, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Johnson. So the recommendation from staff, at least in this particular case, is to start with option 2 and then do an incremental review annually about this and work from there. Is that correct?
Correct.
That is your recommendation? Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments from the council with respect to this matter? Mr. Scharf, any other information you'd like to disseminate about the stormwater rates and the resolution attached?
Mayor, council members, nothing directly really other than, page 8 of what you have in front of you too also provides for some comparisons on affordability relative to some of your neighbors. So if you do look at scenario 1, which is what is being recommended, you could see where it falls within other communities.
Sure.
So hopefully that's helpful.
Very good, thank you. So the purpose of the meeting today is to review these rates. Are you asking for a motion to pick one of the recommendations?
Direction is what I'm looking for, so I can prepare the resolution for the next council meeting.
Okay, very good, thank you. Counselor Johnson?
I would move to direct staff to create a resolution as a hybrid of the options as we discussed previously.
Okay, thank you. A motion by Counselor Johnson. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Counselor Motley. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Beyondich.
A quick question, Sherry. So at that dollar amount, what does that do for the next year?
I'm going to direct that to Mr. Sharp because this is his math here.
Would you repeat the question, please, to Mr. Scharf?
So we've been talking about the $10, so dropping it to the 5. And I guess I was looking
Option
to,
2, what would option 2 look like? It would cover our debt service.
Yep.
How much?
Mayor, council members, it'll cover current operating and debt service payments. So operating is really kind of limited on the storm sewer side. So largely it's covering the bond payments. Any additional consideration for future debt or other capital items outside of that would have to probably come with a consideration for another rate change.
so we have street projects coming up. So,
This would include the next one coming. I did send Mr. Scharf that information.
okay,
The ones after that, and I remember our capital improvement plan, so the 26 or 2016, I think it is. Is that right, Matt? Those we would need to discuss every time we start talking about those projects. We'd have to keep that in the back of our mind that there may need to be a rate increase.
so at this $5 rate, Sherry, would that will just cover the bond, the payment?
Correct.
And it's
Be
not
no
leaving
extra
any,
buffer.
there's nothing extra.
No.
And that would fall as a levy to the taxpayers if there was an issue.
Or special assessment.
to just that area.
Yeah, and it depends. The interesting point we're in right now is the debt we've already taken. We've already committed these funds that we don't have. So we have to raise the rates to at least cover the funds that we don't have. If we
it's
want to
not
plan
allowed-
forward, yeah, it doesn't plan for anything future. So I don't know if maybe you guys want to talk about it's 550 and we start just adding a little bit to the pot, a little more extra. So it'd be $5.50, $8, $10, $10.50, $6.50, would be the schedule then, just a hair higher, just to get us moving somewhere.
So as finance director, Sherry, what would your recommendation be?
Well, I know that $120 doesn't go very far these days. Doesn't barely put gas in your truck or buy some groceries. But that being said, I feel the pain. But in my book, I'd rip the Band-Aid off and do it once.
So, the motion on the floor, incremental increases over a 3-year period, for example, and then maybe a review on an annual basis if there needs adjustments to be made. I think that's the point, is to try to minimize the impact each year. But by starting out with $5, it just pays our bond debt. If we increase it a little bit more over the next 3 years, it helps build up that fund in order to accomplish the goals and objectives we need for what we need to do our work projects. Because if we just covering the debt now, what's going to happen for the following 2 years, 3 years down the road, these new projects? How is that going to be the case? So do we make a decision for the rates for the residential and commercial properties to bite the bullet for the higher rate, or we do this incrementally? And I think that was the recommendation in the motion, to do it incrementally moving forward. I think that's what staff is recommending we do. We won't realize that buffer immediately, but it'll be incrementally as we move forward. And then if it's not enough based upon our projects, then we just review it on an annual basis.
Going back to the finance director.
And your question?
I don't know, what you're telling me is we are just covering the bond payment. There is nothing extra.
There's nothing extra if you just do with option 2. You're making the bond payment. So, like the mayor said, and discussion has been held with council, this is up to your choice. You're going to have to, in a year or two, or when we do the next bond for the street projects, you'll have to revisit. It'll be a painful discussion then, too.
Thank you.
And with the rates comes, you do the street project, then there's the assessment that goes on top of the residential and the property owners too. So it's all, there's increases all around. So the incremental piece is something for us to seriously consider as part of the resolution to review. Councilor Johnson.
I would amend my motion to add the 50 cents. I think that would be a little bit of a cushion, and it helps us to plan ahead in case something does happen. And then it wouldn't be as painful next year if it's another 50 cents. And again, it's for budgeting purposes for families and businesses to be able to look ahead. So I will amend my motion.
To 50 cents a year for,
Your option, it's option 2 plus 50 cents.
Yes, Brett.
okay, the option 2 plus 50
plus
cents.
50
Okay, very good.
cents.
So the motion was amended by Councilor Johnson to approve a resolution, option number 2, with an increase of additional 50 cents. Is there support for that of the person who seconded the motion?
Counselor Johnson, I was hoping you were going to sneak that out, so thank you. And yes, I will support that.
Okay, very
amendment.
good.
Thank
So
you.
it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? That's agreeable to staff? Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, please.
Mayor and council members, the next item will be the sanitary sewer study. Similar approach in terms of, I guess, philosophy on what we're looking at for establishing any proposed change to the sanitary sewer. We do look to cover expenditures and debt service. This element does also include future consideration for additional debt. So you will see that show up in here as well. Just to start off with, on this element, I'm looking at what I'm showing as page 2. Somebody wants to tell me what they're seeing. It's this one for the last 3 years with the little squigglies off to the right.
The paper.
So actual page 2. All right. So if we look back in the last few years, we can see from a net operating perspective, a bit of a decline on the bottom line. So some of the elements that we're looking at here is looking to course correct some of that just throughout the last 3 years. So through these adjustments that I'll work through, we can see that we're sort of building up from the trend that we're starting to notice over the last 3 years. The page 3 just again shows some of that information visually for you all on the last few years of performance that we sort of use as the starting point for our considerations and analysis. We continue to work through. We do highlight some existing debt that the city has on the system. So you can see those payments there, page 4, 5, and I believe 6. And then working through on page 7, this actually goes through the actual cash expenses of the system. So it doesn't include items like depreciation where it's more of a non-cash item. We want to know exactly what's going out the door for the system in reality and not necessarily just from an accounting perspective. Of course, that is important, but from an actual payment perspective, we care about the actual dollars in and out. You can see there's a column for adjustments. I'll go into a little bit more detail there, but we did adjust for things like wage increases, pension or benefits there, since we are looking at something that starts off with a 2023 value. So we've made some adjustments, and that's how we're arriving at that estimated column as our starting point. That's sort of the base of current state with adjustments to already existing rate increases. You all did have, I believe it's a 7% increase from 2023 and 2024. So we've accommodated that in these numbers, as well as, again, those adjustments for wages that we know exist. Page 8 does provide some of that detail that you see roll up from that page 7. Certainly happy to take questions there, but I won't go into all of that just for today. We've also incorporated some of the elements that we've discussed on the stormwater side surrounding frequency of how often this gets looked at. 3 years was the term that we considered here, so some of the costs that are being added in are including making sure that's happening on a 3-year basis. But of course, we're adding that in on an annual basis so that you're not seeing a 3-year lump in that payment every time that happens. So if we roll to page 10 here, what this is describing is the phase 1 and phase 2. Part of the resolution that you have in front of you in draft form for consideration is a phased-in approach of the changes, again, recognizing we're not necessarily trying to throw it all in at one time here in the next calendar year. So we did provide for a proposed bond payment of an additional $441,000. The details of that information are provided in the assumptions on page 11. It also allows for a $200,000 upgrade for the plant and a 4% funding or 4% rate on a $6 million public utility capital improvement project somewhere in 2025 to 2027. So I think this one would contemplate that project being funded likely, I would suppose, in 2025 with a payment starting in 2026. And that's where that $441,000 shows up on page 10, that phase 2 on the far right column. So we can see as it works through, I'm on page 10 again, as it works through some of these annual requirements of the system, we can see that there's about $3.3 to $3.4 million of need as phase 1, and then it almost rolls up to $4 million in phase 2. Again, those are being sort of considered in in a 2025 and 2026 adjustment. Where we sit currently for charges of service with those adjustments I mentioned earlier for wages has us at 2.7 million. So we can see that difference there being somewhere around 640,000 in phase one and 550 in phase two, with some adjustments for phase two from revenues from prior. So what that means from a dollars and cents perspective, because I think that's really what the important thing here is, proposed monthly bill change for residents on phase one of about $14, $13.98, and phase two, $11.95. Approximate average bill then for residents would be in the $75 range for phase one, and then adding to that in phase two around $87 per month. We did provide also for some comparisons of other communities as well. That will be on the last page, page 13. Kind of shows you where you sit currently versus what that phased approach would look like for phase one. I do want to asterisk that a little bit by saying, that doesn't consider other communities kind of having the same conversation. So you would probably see some of these other communities actually a little higher than what's shown. Just knowing that we're nearing year end, rate adjustments typically happen often on an annual basis, to where you might see some of those other areas actually falsely lower than what they probably are looking at for next year. So again, just to sort of wrap a bow on this study, it is a little more detailed or comprehensive, I suppose, is maybe another way of saying it, as this compared to the storm. You do have added expenditures that you consider in part of these costs that we're looking at for the rate structure. So there are other items rather than just paying debt service that we consider here and that have been considered in this study. But overall, again, this does provide for some future capital needs. We can see, again, that there's a bonding that's incorporated in our phase two, as well as another project paid on a cash basis rather than for bonding. So I suppose the resolution does provide in draft form where you sit currently. Service charge of $5.10 per month with a per unit charge of $10.43 per month. That phase one would look to adjust that service charge to $6.27 a month and a per unit charge of $12.83 per month. And then phase two being $7.34. That would be effective January 1st of 2026 for your base charge, and a per unit charge of $15.02 per month. I'll stop there for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scharf. Questions from the council? Yeah, sure. We'll hold your question in abeyance, Councilor Johnson, and we'll move on to others. So my question is that, it's like the sewer rates per par, this is a phased-in approach moving forward. I think it's reasonable and prudent and necessary to move. So I'm supportive of the increases incrementally as proposed. So thank you. Councilor Johnson.
So we're talking just about residential here. We're not talking about commercial, or is this across the board? Across the board. Okay, so just the way I think, so right now, based on the information, the current bill is $680, which comes out to approximately $729.60 a year. Next year, it would go up to $74.78, which would be $897.36 a year. And the third year from this year, or second year out on the plan, it goes to $86.73 for a total of $1,476 a year. Is that correct math? This is really tough because I'm just thinking about our family budget. And the good thing is that we can conserve water, we can not water our lawns, we can do all those things that may help lower our monthly bills. And it's unfortunate that we have put ourselves in this situation where we have to do such steep increases, and for that, I apologize. It's one of those things that I think that we, as a city, need to be more on top of so that we're not increasing things by several, by a couple $100. I'm at a loss because it's tough. All of us in this room pay these rates. All of us, all of the elected officials pay these rates. We are all going to see an impact. And again, it's going to affect rents, it's going to affect businesses, and I think that makes it very hard to make these decisions. I truly appreciate all your time and effort you put into both of these reports. They're facts, and barring any incredible money-saving events or efficiency, ways to become more efficient, I think this will help people to fix the leaks in their toilets and all that stuff, because all of that adds, those drips really add up and will add up even more. So thank you very much for your presentation and your information. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. What is staff's recommendation? Pardon? Very good, thank you. Any other questions, comments from the council before I entertain a motion to move one way or the other? No other questions. Staff's recommendation is for adopting the resolution for final approval at the council meeting as presented. Looking for council action. A move to approve by Councilor Freely. Is there support?
Support.
By Councilor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Scharf. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you for making the trip up.
Item number 3 is Mr. Matt Reed, our city engineer of record from SEH, regarding a change order for the 10th Avenue West and 13th Street South portion of the 2023 street project.
Matt, good morning.
Good morning.
Matt Reed, SCH, or engineer of record.
Good morning. The first item is a fairly sizable change order as it relates to the 10th and 13th project. So let me give a little bit of background on what happened. So originally, we had not planned on going into the intersection and replacing any of the infrastructure within the intersection of 12th Avenue. We were going to go into the edge of it, we were going to tie into the existing infrastructure, and we were going to plan on getting that infrastructure at a different date. That was the plan as part of this project. Once they dug into the intersection, they found out that stuff was not in very good condition. It was broken, it was decrepit, it was just at the end of its life. So we made the decision that, hey, we're here now, now's the time to do it. It's not gonna be any cheaper. That's part of the reason why that intersection stayed closed a little bit longer than it was supposed to. So now we ended up replacing the manhole and all of the pipes in that intersection. So it should not have to get redone at some point when we redo the infrastructure in that area. There was some backups happening and some things were happening. So it was necessary, it was the right time to do it. From a budget standpoint, we are still under budget even with this change order. We are still under the original bid amount. So we're not even with change orders, we're still under the original bid amount. We haven't even tapped the contingency yet. So it was a decision that needed to be made on the spot. It was the right decision to make. There was some lead time on the structures and whatnot. So it was something that the timing was right, not something we should have waited on. We would have continued to have problems and probably had to close that intersection down soon and fix it anyway. So it was just one of those underground discoveries as we got going that felt like the right thing to do and get it while we can get it as cheap as possible. So that is the amount. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I'll move the approval of the change order.
Councilor Freely moves to approve the change order request. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilor Johnson Further discussion, is this within the contingency?
We aren't even into the contingency yet. We're not even into the contingency yet. We're still actually under the original budget still.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Johnson.
Thank you. My only other question was, are we going to, or I'm sure we already are, monitoring the other antiquated stuff that's connected to the new stuff so that we're making sure that if anything comes up? Okay, thank you. And thanks for making that decision then and there instead of having to do the mobilization and all that stuff over again. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you. It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item.
Next item is Matt's contract is up for the renewal of professional services for the city engineer of record.
Where has the time
I
gone?
know, doesn't that go by fast?
That's what I said too. I honestly, it was about a month ago and I realized, geez, it's been 3 years already since we did this. So, yeah. So in front of you is, I just put together a proposal and a contract for another 3 years and, hopefully we can continue working and moving forward. So I'm just gonna, if you guys have any questions or have anything you'd like to ask me, that would be, or have any concerns, I'll just fire away.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
I will move the approval of the professional services agreement with Matt Reed and SEH.
Council Freely moves to approve the proposed contract for the next 3 years for professional services agreement with the city engineer of record, which is SCH. Is there support? Is there support?
Support for discussion.
Support by Councilor Johnson for further discussion. Further discussion, Councilor Motley.
I guess I kind of wanted to know, have your rates increased from the prior 3-year contract?
They did slightly from the original one that was 3 years ago. So we had held the rates for the last 3 years. So we hadn't adjusted year by year for inflation or anything like that. So they are up a little bit from what they were 3 years ago.
Sherry, is that in the budget?
Sherry?
What is the little? What's the percentage?
I'd have to go through each one, but it's an hour by hour contract. So it's,
For usage, basically.
I'm pretty sure I've budgeted enough, so, but I can double check. Definitely, it's in the 2025 budget, so.
Okay.
I didn't realize 3 years snuck up on us that fast either. So I just assumed we're gonna be in the budget.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Councilor Johnson?
And that was going to be my question. While I appreciate that it didn't escalate over the last 3 years, I feel like we should be able to budget so that as we're moving forward each of the year, there's an escalation. Even honestly, and I'm advocating for you guys because of all you do, but to go 3 years and not have any increase doesn't seem practical to me. If that's what y'all want, that's great, but I think that for the service we get, you almost literally being on call all the time unless you shut your phone off is phenomenal. You coming into meetings on your night off, or rushing into town, can't thank you enough for that. So I'm all in support of this with the increases and just thank you for what you do for the city. It's going to be here for another 100 years because of stuff you do and your team does. So I appreciate it and thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Sherry?
I just want to say thank you for those comments, Counselor Johnson. I totally agree. And also too, just wanted you, council, to be aware that most of the project Matt brings in pays for his time. So it's paid by the project or the bond or the, so.
Thank you, Sherry. It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Matt.
thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Before you run away, Matt, too, the next item on the agenda is the resolution to apply for and accept funds from CDBG for the library restrooms accessibility project.
So moved.
Move to approve by Councilor Johnson. Is there support? By Councilor Freely. Further discussion. I have some
This is just to submit a grant for the requested a bathroom remodel, which will have to be remodeled due to the steam conversion, because when they do the steam conversion, they're going to be knocking into the bathroom walls, and they're going to have to move the bathroom.
Yeah,
They're going
and,
to try to get this portion of the project paid for by grants,
what?
by grants, not by city. So
No, I understand that.
we're working on that.
Thank you for trying to cut us off at the pass here.
Yeah.
That's good.
Just want to make that well known to the public, that this is our attempt, this
my-
is grant number one. There'll probably be 3 grants total, but we're going to do our best to get this portion fully funded. If we got to spend the money in the steam conversion anyway, let's get the rest of it funded by something else.
And these would be library restrooms, accessibility for all.
It would be accessible for all. Right now, they are not. You cannot get in
but
the
they will be
doorway.
for
Yeah.
all.
The existing bathrooms with the hallway they have and the configuration they have that kind of go at an angle, you can't get a wheelchair down there.
And I know one of our highest priorities is steam conversion, applying for grants for steam conversion, et cetera, but under CBDG, there's only certain things that they'll fund, right? And this is one of those projects that they will fund, so thank you.
Yeah.
It has been moved and supported. Further discussion, Councilor Beyondich.
And I would assume if you apply for this grant, is there a matching fund?
There is. They won't pay for the full thing, but they also won't give us the money till, Jenny, maybe early September next year. So we have time to look for the other grants.
Okay, so
The
other,
CDBG likes to work with other people, so if we can go in there and tell them our intent is to work with the Department of Education on a library grant, and also IRRB, they like to hear that too, because they like to partner with everybody else. So that is our intent, is to apply Department of Education for library grant, and then also to IRRB.
okay, thank you.
ADA accessibility is a big topic, and it's a big thing. And, thankfully, City Hall's been done quite a long time ago, but that building is not.
Yeah, accessibility for all is very important. So it has been moved and supported to apply for funds from CDBG. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Item number 5 is review the financial reports for October 2024.
We had a meeting on Monday. We had an opportunity to discuss finances. There were people from the department heads were there present. I got there a little bit late, got the gist of the things. Councilor Beyondich was there, so Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. Yes, I was able to be there for most of the meeting, but hit all the highlights, and I think all the questions that I had been answered and explained, so I truly appreciate having these meetings. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Councilor Beyondich. It's nice to be able to review the financials on a regular basis. Sherry's been very accommodating with respect to that as well, with Britt, our city administrator, so thank you. Any other questions, comments regarding the financials for October 24? Okay, thank you. Next item, please.
Thank you. The next item is a lease we have, existing lease we have with the state of Minnesota for placement of monitoring equipment on the roof of City Hall. That lease is expiring November 30th. So we need to renew it for December 21st.
Are we
First,
kind
2024.
of quadrupling the lease agreement there, or no?
It's free. I don't think they charge them anything.
I was being facetious, but, okay.
What happens when they come to look at their equipment, they go to the information window, they get a key, they go upstairs and access it, they bring the key back. So we have a sign-out log for them, so we know who's going in and out up there.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Move the agreement.
Council Johnson moves to approve, supported by Councilor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Next item, please.
The next item is a preliminary property negotiation for sale of land. It is a closed session, so if there's any other items, maybe we want to discuss those before we go to closed session.
Okay, looking for a motion to move to closed session by Councilor Beyondich, supported by Councilor Motley. Further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you. We are now in closed session. We'll ask those of you who are in the audience now to please vacate the city council chamber so we can have a closed session meeting regarding some property negotiations in conjunction with Minnesota Statute 13D.05, 13D.05 Subdivision 3. Thank you.